On the morning of April 19, 1956, a middle-aged man in a worn diving suit slipped into the murky waters of Portsmouth Harbour. Somewhere beneath the surface, within sight of one of the most heavily guarded Soviet warships ever to visit Britain, he vanished. His name was Lionel Kenneth Philip Crabb, though everyone called him Buster, after the American Olympic swimmer Buster Crabb. Decorated war hero, expert diver, and, on that cold April morning, a spy on a mission his own prime minister had forbidden. 14 months later, a headless body in a diving suit washed ashore on a beach not far away. What happened to Buster Crabb in those dark waters? Was it an accident? Soviet assassination? Or something even more troubling? A man sacrificed by his own government and then erased. The British government has never fully explained. Key files remain classified to this day, not scheduled for release until 2057, a full century after his death. This is the story of one of the Cold War's strangest and most enduring mysteries. April 1956. The Cold War is at its height, but there are signs of a thaw. Soviet leaders Nikita Khrushchev and Nikolai Bulganin are making an unprecedented goodwill visit to Britain, the first such visit since Moscow's shift toward peaceful coexistence. They're traveling aboard the cruiser Ordzhonikidze, a sleek Sverdlov-class warship that represents the cutting edge of Soviet naval engineering. For Prime Minister Anthony Eden, this visit is delicate. Britain is trying to improve relations with Moscow. Any provocation could be disastrous. Eden issues explicit instructions to the intelligence services: no surveillance operations against the Soviet delegation, no risks, nothing that could embarrass the government. But to British naval intelligence, the Ordzhonikidze represents something else entirely: an opportunity. This cruiser has capabilities they don't fully understand. Its maneuverability is exceptional. The previous year, Crabb had dived beneath a Soviet Sverdlov-class cruiser and, according to his diving partner Sidney Knowles, discovered something remarkable: a large circular opening at the bow containing a propeller that could direct thrust sideways, explaining the Soviet ship's superior maneuverability. Here was another Soviet warship sitting in a British harbor. When would they ever get another chance like this? MI6 decides to take a closer look, and they know exactly who to call. Lionel Crabb was, by 1956, something of a legend in diving circles. During the Second World War, he'd served in Gibraltar, where Italian frogmen from the elite Decima Flottiglia Mass were wreaking havoc, attaching limpet mines to Allied ships under cover of darkness. Crabb's job was to find those mines and remove them before they detonated. It was work that required extraordinary nerve. One mistake, one wrong movement, and you were dead. He was brilliant at it. He earned the George Medal for bravery in January 1944 and an OBE in December 1945 for his services. After the war, he became principal diving officer for northern Italy, clearing mines from harbors in Venice and Livorno. But by 1956, that was all behind him. Crabb had been forced to retire from the Navy in March 1955. At 47, he was considered too old for operational diving. His health had deteriorated. He smoked heavily, drank heavily, and was no longer the physically formidable figure he'd once been. He drifted into civilian life, working variously as a salesman, an art dealer, even briefly as an undertaker, struggling to adjust. The glory days were over. And yet, when MI6 came calling with one more mission, Crabb said yes. Perhaps he missed the excitement. Perhaps he needed the money. Perhaps he simply couldn't resist the chance to matter again. Whatever his reasons, on April 17, 1956, Lionel Crabb checked into the Sally Port Hotel in Portsmouth. In a breach of standard intelligence protocol, he signed the register using his real name. His MI6 handler registered under the name Smith, though whether this was an alias or his real name remains disputed. The Ordzhonikidze was due to arrive the next day. The mission was straightforward, at least on paper. Crabb would dive beneath the Soviet cruiser and examine its hull, particularly the keel, propellers, rudder, and any unusual features that might explain its remarkable handling. He'd be using a Heinke oxygen rebreather, a closed-circuit system that recycled his oxygen and produced no telltale bubbles on the surface. On the evening of April 18th, as the Soviet ships entered Portsmouth Harbour, Crabb spent the night socializing with friends in nearby Havant. According to witnesses, he drank heavily, 5 double whiskeys. His blood toxicity would still be dangerously elevated by morning. The next morning, April 19th, Crabb made his dive. Just before 7 o'clock, assisted by Lieutenant Commander George Franklin, a clearance diver from HMS Vernon, Crabb entered the water from a launch moored about 70 meters from the Ordzhonikidze. According to some accounts, he surfaced after about 20 minutes, cold and struggling with the conditions, near zero visibility, freezing water. He complained bitterly. Franklin checked his equipment and oxygen levels. Crabb asked for extra ballast weights, then went back in. He had little more than 90 minutes of oxygen remaining. By 9:15, Franklin knew something was wrong. Crabb should have returned long ago. Following instructions Crabb had given him, Franklin took the launch back to HMS Vernon and reported to Smith, who was waiting on the shoreline. No proper search was launched. Instead, Smith paid both hotel bills, collected Crabb's belongings, including his distinctive Spanish sword stick with its silver knob carved into the shape of a crab, and returned to London. Lionel Crabb was never seen alive again. What happened next reveals just how badly MI6 had miscalculated. Within days of Crabb's disappearance, a police officer visited the Sallyport Hotel and tore pages from the guest register, erasing any record that Crabb or his handler had ever stayed there. Sources differ on exactly how many pages were removed. Some say 2, others 3 or 4, but the intent was clear. But the Soviets already knew something had happened. During dinner on the evening of April 19th, the commander of the Ordzhonikidze mentioned to his British hosts that his watchman had spotted a frogman near the ship that morning, around 7:30 a.m., near the bow. He wasn't making an official complaint, not yet, but he wanted to know what was going on. MI6 scrambled to contain the damage. On April 29th, the Admiralty released a statement. Commander Crabb had gone missing during tests of underwater equipment in Stokes Bay, several miles from where he'd actually disappeared. It was a lie, and it fooled no one. Days after Crabb's disappearance, the story broke in the British press. The Soviets issued their own statement, confirming they'd seen a frogman near their cruiser. Pravda denounced what it called a shameful operation of underwater espionage directed against those who come to this country on a friendly visit. Prime Minister Eden was furious. He'd explicitly forbidden intelligence operations during the visit. MI6 had defied him, botched the mission, and now Britain faced an international embarrassment. On May 9th, Eden stood in the House of Commons and delivered 3 carefully worded sentences that explained nothing. He refused all requests for further information, citing national security. Behind closed doors, Eden ordered an inquiry. The head of MI6, Sir John Sinclair, left office shortly afterward, replaced by Sir Dick White, formerly the head of MI5. Whether Sinclair's departure was a direct consequence of the affair or had already been set in motion remains a matter of debate among historians. But the questions didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. 14 months later, on June 9, 1957, 2 fishermen, one reportedly named John Randall, made a grim discovery near Pilsey Island in Chichester Harbour, some miles east of Portsmouth. A body in a diving suit caught in a fishing net. The body was badly decomposed. It had no head. It had no hands. Identification seemed impossible. What followed only deepened the mystery. Sidney Knowles, Crabb's former diving partner and close friend, was called to examine the body. Knowles had dived with Crabb for years and knew his body intimately, every scar, every mark. After his examination, Knowles stated that the body was definitely not Crabb. He couldn't find the scars he expected to see. But the pathologist, Dr. King, initially failed to find any identifying marks. However, when he re-examined the body on June 14th, he reported finding an inverted Y-shaped scar on the left knee that matched Crabb's medical records. Based on this evidence, and the diving suit, which matched the type Crabb had been wearing, The coroner ruled that these were indeed the remains of Lionel Crabb. The verdict was open. The cause of death could not be determined, but the circumstances raised more questions than they answered. Why was the body found so far from where Crabb had disappeared? Why were the head and hands missing? Natural decomposition or deliberate removal to prevent identification? How had the body remained hidden for 14 months, only to be pulled up in a fishing net? And why did Knowles, who knew Crabb better than almost anyone, insist it wasn't him? Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged about what really happened to Buster Crabb. The accident theory. The simplest explanation is that Crabb's death was an accident. He was 47, out of shape, and diving in terrible conditions. The water was cold, the visibility near zero. He'd been drinking heavily the night before, 5 double whiskeys, and his blood would still have been toxic. Modern diving experts have suggested several possibilities: oxygen toxicity from his closed-circuit rebreather, carbon dioxide poisoning, hypothermia, or simple disorientation. In the murky waters beneath the Soviet cruiser, any of these could have been fatal. His body may have become trapped in debris, only to be dislodged months later by storms or tidal action. The missing head and hands could be explained by decomposition and marine scavengers. Extremities are often the first to go. It's mundane, perhaps, but it fits the evidence. The Soviet assassination theory. In 2007, a retired Russian sailor named Eduard Koltsov, then 74, came forward with a very different account. Koltsov claimed that the Soviets had been tipped off about Crabb's mission in advance, possibly by a mole within British intelligence. When the ship reached Portsmouth, Soviet frogmen were already standing by. On the morning of April 19th, Koltsov said he was ordered to dive beneath the ship and patrol for enemy divers. He claims he found Crabb, cut his air hose, and slit his throat. For this, he said, he was later awarded the Order of the Red Star. He even displayed the medal and the dagger he claimed to have used. The story generated headlines, but investigators found reasons for doubt. A Russian military newspaper journalist who examined Koltsov's claims found them improbable. Archives did not confirm that Koltsov had ever served as a Navy frogman, and there was no record of him receiving the medal he displayed. For 30 years after his military service, Koltsov had worked as a bus driver. The Kim Philby connection. Kim Philby would eventually be exposed as one of the most damaging Soviet moles in British intelligence history, a double agent who had been passing secrets since the 1930s. He finally defected to Moscow in January 1963. But his connection to the Crabb affair is complicated. By April 1956, Philby had already resigned from the service back in 1951, when suspicion first fell on him. Though publicly cleared in 1955, he wasn't formally re-employed by MI6 until August 1956, 4 months after Crabb's disappearance. Author Ben McIntyre, in his 2014 book A Spy Among Friends, suggests that Philby may still have learned of Crabb's mission through his remaining contacts in the intelligence community and warned his Soviet handlers. Reviewers have called McIntyre's analysis probably the best we will ever get on this murky question. If true, it means Crabb may have swum into a trap, betrayed before he ever entered the water. But this remains speculative. The evidence is circumstantial. The defection theory. The strangest theory of all suggests that Crabb didn't die at all. A 1960 book by J. Bernard Hutton, Frogman spy, claimed, based on alleged Russian sources, that Crabb had been captured alive and taken to the Soviet Union, where he served as a diving instructor for the Soviet Navy. The book even included a photograph allegedly showing Crabb alive in the USSR. Years later, Sidney Knowles made startling claims of his own. In 2006, he told author Tim Binding that he had been ordered by MI5 to identify the body as Crabb when he knew it was definitely not Crabb. He suggested Crabb had intended to defect and that MI5 had him killed to prevent it. There is no solid evidence for any of this, but the theories persist, fueled by the government's continued secrecy. The most remarkable thing about the Crabb affair may be how much we still don't know. Key files relating to the case remain classified. At some point, the government extended their classification from the standard 30 years to a full century. They are not scheduled to be released until 2057, 100 years after Crabb's presumed death. Why? What could possibly justify such extreme secrecy about a failed diving mission from nearly 70 years ago? Some speculate that the files contain evidence of Soviet penetration of British intelligence that the government still finds too embarrassing to release. Others suggest they might reveal the identities of agents or methods that remain sensitive. Or perhaps the answer is simpler: bureaucratic inertia, combined with a reflexive instinct for secrecy that has outlived any legitimate purpose. Whatever the reason, the silence has allowed speculation to flourish. Every few years, another theory emerges, another witness comes forward, another piece of the puzzle is claimed to have been found. The mystery of Buster Crabb has become self-perpetuating, a story that grows more elaborate with each retelling precisely because the truth has never been officially confirmed. Lionel Crabb is buried in Milton Cemetery in Portsmouth. His gravestone reads, "In loving memory of my son, Commander Lionel Crabb, RNVR, GMOBE. At rest at last, at rest at last. If only we could be certain." What we know for certain is this. On April 19, 1956, a decorated British war hero entered the waters of Portsmouth Harbour on a mission for MI6. He never came back. Everything else, why he was sent, how he died, what happened to his body, who bears responsibility, remains, officially at least, a mystery. Perhaps the files released in 2057 will finally provide answers, or perhaps they'll only raise more questions. Until then, Buster Crabb remains what he became that cold April morning, a man who slipped beneath the surface and vanished into history.